Right? Imagine you go to a surgeon and you just heard from your friend, this surgeon didn't even pass his medical degree and he will kill you when he operates a bypass operation in a heart, all fake certificates. Knowing that information, would you trust your life on a bypass surgery with that surgeon?
Okay, well,
would you?
Obviously not. No.
Well, no, obviously not. Yeah, obviously not. So if somebody comes along and says, I am a prophet of God, God has appointed me as a warner, as a guide to you, and this guy is a lying, cheating murderer, and so on and so forth, would you listen to him?
I've changed his ways.
Yeah, but if someone himself is telling you, speak the truth, and he lies, you wouldn't. Yeah, exactly. So that is why we're saying prophets and messengers have been raised by our Creator to be truthful, reliable individuals, to tell us. That's why when they look at their lives and they say, look, I have a message for you from God, they will take it seriously, because this man, there's no reason for him to lie. And then this is exactly what, when we analyze the life and biography of Prophet Muhammad, the final messenger, you will see that yes, it gives you more than enough reason to go and look at his message because of his life. He was even called by his own enemies, truthful, reliable one, as-Sadiq al-Amin. So when he brings the Quran, you can examine the Quran and say, okay, let's critically analyze it.
But obviously everyone doesn't have time to analyze the Quran.
But you have time to watch Netflix and social media.
Because one of them is, for pleasure, right?
Yeah, pleasure. This life is going to come to an end, right? One day. You're going to die within the next 200 years. Yeah. I'm going to die in the next 200 years. Because we haven't got the...
But
I'm just giving you a safe gap.
From what I've seen...
But do you agree that we are going... All three of us will die within the next 200 years?
Yeah, okay.
Right. So our pleasure will come to an end. Okay. What awaits then afterwards? If there is a life in which there is pleasure forever and forever in heaven, or suffering and misery and torture in hell, it is more important for us to concentrate on the bigger life, the eternal life.
I'm not convinced.
No, I'm not talking about convincing. I'm talking about prioritization.
But I'm not convinced enough to prioritize it. Do you know what I mean?
So you're saying, I will spend my life here and give priority to this life of 100 years or 130 years, maximum maybe, compared to a possible life, 120 something max.
You're lucky.
I don't think people live that long anymore, right? Right? Yeah, I'm just
110
maybe 110 and 20. Okay, I'm just giving. So you are going to forfeit a possible life of billions of zillions of years for 110 years of this life.
This is just Pascal's wager, pretty much, right?
But yeah, call it Pascal's wager. So where would the priorities be then, according to Pascal's wager?
I understand, and that is one of the more convincing arguments. And Pascal's wager, it made me think about looking into, because I used to just think, atheist, whatever, right? But the point is that, for me, I've come to the general judgment that I could be as wrong as anyone, and if I'm wrong, that's But
have you tried to say, if
I've spoke to hours with, I had a Muslim friend and we'd call for hours. He tried to explain it.
Did he explain about the falsification test of the Quran and the positive proof of the Quran?
Yeah.
What were they?
The test of the surah.
Yeah, bringing a surah like it. Why are people failing?
Well, that's a whole other thing. I think that's a bit of an unfair test.
Why is it unfair?
Because I spoke to my friend, and maybe my friend was wrong, but he said it has to be written. The proof of the surah has to be written in Arabic. Yeah.
Because the test,
of course,
is challenges to bring an Arabic chapter, a surah like it.
But who judges? Who judges the surah?
The people who are specialized in the language.
So Arabic speakers, yeah?
Anyone who knows Arabic and specializes in the language, you can say yes.
So who approves it? If I write a surah, who approves it?
There are many people who are imitating already in the internet. You can go and find.
But that's the thing.
What I'm saying is, if a test is objective, you use objective criteria to assess it.
But the test
if the test is subjective, then you have a problem.
But all right. So if I wanted to submit my challenge, where would I go? Who is deemed worthy? Firstly, the only person deemed worthy enough.
Let me give you a little bit of background information. Firstly, the Quranic challenge is objective.
What is the Quranic challenge?
To bring a whole Quran like it, or 10 chapters like it, or a single chapter like it. The smallest of the chapter is like 3 lines. It's an Arabic language. It's a composition with its own rhymes and meters.
Yeah.
You've got speech has different. We've been speaking in prose most of the time. We haven't been speaking in poetry. So poetry is another genre of speech in which we have rhymes and meters and so on, right? So the Quran came in a specific stylistics in which it is not prose, it is not poetry, but its own linguistic genre. The Arab have speech in which they have prose and poetry or a mixture and so on. And the Quran says, if you doubt it's not from God, produce something like it, which is unlike any of your speech. So the challenge is bringing in composition in which you can match the stylistics. The stylistics of the Quran, when analyzed, because it's objective. You see, when I say stylistics, if I have, say, a subject, a verb, an object, whether it's singular, dual, and so on, and it's an object which is, intransitive verb and intransitive verb, these are objective. Yeah? If I say bring something like in this category, these are all objective. If I say, okay, fine, it has to be a subject followed by a verb and so on. You can't bring like verb first and subject first. To make it like it. So if I ask you, bring a camera like this one, you can't bring a camera like that color because that's unlike it.
Who's the judge?
I'm just telling you. The judge is the people who are with reason. If I say bring a camera like it and you bring this one, you would say that's unlike it. The color is different.
Don't all people have reason?
Yeah.
So everyone's a judge because if you have to be Arabic speaking,
I'm just giving you the criteria who can be the judge on the panel. If somebody says, yeah, that's like it, I will say, no, that's unlike it because even the color is different. The shape, size, look at the number of, the lenses for the cameras itself different. So when the Quran says bring something like it, it has to be with the nature, same linguistic genre. So the objective nature of the challenge is there in the Quran. People know about it, and people are still failing to bring it. So the Quran affirms first, human beings and jinns, if they were to come together to bring something like it, they cannot. It's an assertion. The Quran doesn't just simply stop there with an assertion and say that's it. It says, look, if you are skeptic, if you are doubtful that this Quran is from God, that's why to falsify it. Bring a chapter like it, falsify it.
But to falsify it has to be able to be proved wrong, yeah?
Falsify means bringing a chapter imitating the Quran, as the Quran demands of it.
It has to be provable wrong. So who is the judge is what I'm getting at, because I understand.
You can bring a chapter and you can say, look, I am imitating chapter number 114, for example. 112, right? It's 114. Any chapter. There's 114 chapters in the Quran, you know? Yeah?
Yep, fine. Yep.
Say I'm imitating 114. So you are expected to demonstrate your knowledge of the stylistics of chapter of 114. You'll say, look, this chapter has these lines, ayat is called, and this is the line, this is the stylistics of it. This is the next line, this is the stylistics of the next line, and so on. And here is my composition with the same stylistics, but of course employing, not plagiarism, employing, this has one verb with a particular composition, I have a different verb with the same stylistics. Because we're not asking you to imitate 100% plagiarism, because that's not bringing something like it. And then, if you demonstrate that this is, you've done it, then you can say, look, I brought something like it. That's the problem. People are unable to demonstrate that they have matched the stylistics of any chapters of the Quran. There are plenty there. If you go on the internet and type in a surah like it, you'll find plenty of examples. And none of them you'll find they've demonstrated to anyone.
So you can judge it yourself.
I am saying judgment should be left to qualified, knowledgeable individuals of the Arabic language. It doesn't have to be a Muslim. It could be people who are expert in the language.
I just think that's such a far-fetched challenge for anyone. What percent of the world speaks Arabic?
Many.
But what percent?
No. Many. Arabic is actually one of the world languages. In fact, it's
30%. What percent of them are Muslim? Quite a lot, right? So it comes down to such a small pool of
If you can't do it, get someone else to do it. That's what the Quran says. The Quran is quite reasonable. It says, look, if you cannot do it, seek your helpers and supporters to do that job.
Do all sects of Islam believe in the same Quran?
Yeah.
The Ahmadis.
Same.
Same amount of.
Same. They believe maybe theologically something different about whether there's a prophet after a Prophet Muhammad or not, whether there's imams and so on and so forth.
How do they believe in the Quran if they believe this?
Because the Quran is one source, they have other sources which corroborates their supposed belief system.
But
Silly.
then how does surely that directly contradicts the Quran?
Many beliefs do, and that's why we're saying these people need to come back to the Quranic message. And that's why the majority of the world are Sunnis, because they are in line with what the Quranic message is. The people who are not in line with the Quran, they have deviated, and you'll find their belief like that.
I have a question about the hadiths that my friend told me about. So it's that Adam was 18, 17 cubits tall. If he was, say that's what, 18 meters tall?
1 second.
Like 10, 20 feet tall. I heard
Yeah, so he's much taller than us, right?
Yeah.
60 cubits is much longer than us.
Just like how that's
In heaven.
But that wasn't on Earth, because I've heard
In heaven.
My friend said he was also that height.
Yeah. Ironically, or surprisingly, look, I was just. Someone asked the same question again. What does it say?
Hadith about height of Adam and later generations.
Exactly. So this is a paper written by one of our friends in Let Me Turn the Tables, and he explains it in terms of what exactly the hadith is talking about. In heaven, this height, when human beings come down, is it gradual progression of, not progression, gradual decline of the height, or is it like when they're sent, when Adam was sent down, it was already in a shorter form?
I've asked two Muslim friends and they said two different things.
Yeah, so this is someone who will go to all the sources, and he will tell you exactly, if I can bring
Who wrote this?
one of our friends.
What's
So
his
simply
name?
put, in the paradise, Waqar Shima. Simply put, in the paradise, Adam's height was 60 cubits. However, on earth, it was reduced from its original perfect height, and it continues that way to this day.
As in, as he was sent down to Earth, he instantly became 6 foot.
He was less, yeah.
All right, like 60.
Yeah. Because what the height was described was in heaven.
So so should I say to my Muslim friend who says he was that height on Earth, you're just wrong?
Yeah, I don't think the hadith says that. Okay, if you understand the hadith in context and find out. So when we are going back to heaven, look, this Earth isn't actually that big compared to our solar system cosmos. Tiny. In hereafter, when the world's going to come to an end and a new world is going to be made, it will be huge. In that, human beings can be taller, bigger, because the world will be bigger, right? You can imagine now, you have a whole Earth like your own home. Distance is not a problem. You can just travel just like that. You can beam yourself from here to the other side of the world, right? You can even think about now in Star Trek, right? But in the technology then in heaven and so on will be far more than what you can imagine. So it's not a problem in terms of the distance. You can have millions of years of distance from one to the other if you want and so on, because the world will be huge, recreated by the Creator. So as we were discussing, just to coming back on that point, we were talking about how can we be sure about this Quran or guidance, the scripture is from God or not? We have to use our critical thinking and scrutinize and see whether we can falsify it and prove it wrong. Because if we find that the Quran, do you expect a book written 1400 years ago talking about science should get something wrong? Because we know science develops and we know more and more about science like they used to do before. There must be something they got it wrong, and we know that. The Bible or many books of the Greek philosophers, whether it's Galen or Aristotle or Hippocrates, they get it wrong. They got it wrong because they only had the scientific tools at that time to tell you about what the reality is. With our advancement today, with microscope and so on and so forth, we are in a better position to understand the reality and more depth.
Obviously, you think the Quran has got nothing
What I'm
wrong.
saying is, a book like the Quran, if it talked about science, you expect some mistakes of scientific nature. I am saying, Muslims are saying, there is nothing that will go against established science.
I can't go into this because I don't know well enough. I can just go.
Yeah. That's one example. So I'll talk about, this is one avenue of knowledge. The Quran talks about history. Someone who is illiterate man in a desert, what does he know living in Arabia, what happened in Indonesia? For example, does he know what happens in the deep sea, in the deep oceans, or deep down in the volcano? Does he know, you see, or in the past, what did the pharaohs do? I mean, does he have access to hieroglyphics? It was a dead language. So when the Quran describes information about the past, and it gets it right, when every other literature at that time, whether it's the Bible, I can compare with the Bible. I wish there was a Christian who can now give some reasons. The Bible talks about a pharaoh at the time of Joseph, for example, and calls it Pharaoh. Quran says no, he's a king. Now, from our knowledge of timelines and so on, we know at that time there was no pharaohs, there were
That
kings.
was 600 years later.
Yeah,
was 600
the
years
pharaohs, the title pharaoh was applied much, much later. So the Quran is not copying the errors of the Bible. It's bringing information which now we know today to be true based on what? Our understanding, unearthing, unpacking of hieroglyphics. Well, you can't just say the Prophet knew hieroglyphics and everything about history.
You know, if there's any way that knowledge could have been passed down otherwise.
Yeah.
And it's not.
What we're saying is, this is one example out of many when we can't find this information source anywhere, not in the community of his people, not in the communities of the Greeks and the Persians and the Romans. So the Prophet is bringing up this information which seems like he's the only source of it. If you find the source of it, then you can say he actually learned from there. But there is nothing to say he learnt it from. That's what we're asking. Go and find the source. And this is one example out of hundreds and hundreds. So if you have hundreds of examples where the Quran could have easily got it wrong by copying the mistakes of the contemporary knowledge of that time, and it doesn't do that. It somehow filters all the errors and gives you what is correct.
I'm not entirely convinced there are no errors, and I can't go into it now.
Now what I'm asking is, this is the claim we're making.
Okay.
You need to scrutinize that claim, substantiate it, or falsify it.
I understand.
If you find
what
I'm saying is, if you find that you cannot falsify it, then you have to really reasonably ask, how did this man know all of these things? When it's, for example, I want to give you one last example, right? Which I talked about today as well. You see the sun setting almost, right? Yeah. What sound does the sound make as a start?
No idea.
Right.
A hiss.
Go on. How does it go?
Well, I'm not going to do an impression of the sound.
Right. So, did you hear it with your ears?
No.
Right. Do you know there are many other stars called pulsars who also emit sounds and frequencies? Pulsars. Yep. Can you hear the sound with your ears? You can't. So if someone were to guess, you can say it may sound like or it may sound like meow 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 meow. It could be anything out of billions of guesses. The Quran.
I'm curious about what. I mean, there's no oxygen in space, so the sun doesn't make.
It emits frequencies.
Yeah, as in it
and
would make a sound if there was oxygen around it.
But you can, because it emits frequencies, you can pick up those frequencies.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
So when the Quran says وَالطَّارِقِ وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الطَّارِقِ النَّجْمُ الثَّاقِبِ, what is الطَّارِقِ, meaning this star called الطَّارِقِ, knocking sound, knock, hammering sound. That's what Tariq means, a knocker. And it says, what is a knocker? The one who knocks. It says, a piercing bright star. Now, why does the Quran describe this star with something is a knocker, something that knocks, hammers, knock, 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 knock. Only today we know from our knowledge of pulsar, you can actually hear it. There's lots of online sound recordings from authoritative organizations which studies astronomy and so on. We can hear the sound. How does the Prophet, this is one out of many examples, I'm just picking up one, how does the Prophet know this? It cannot be something that his community or his contemporaries in other Greek, Roman, Persian lands knew about it. No one describes it. As far as I know, from my searching, there's no information about someone knew about this one. And now, what I'm saying is, this is something, the example I'm giving you as an offering to go and research on this subject. And if you find that this is the case, Quran is the only one that talks about 1400 years ago this information, no one knows about it, and we came to know about it recently, how does the Quran know this? It cannot be just simply guesswork. No, I'm not asking you to take anything on board. I'm giving you information for you to check, verify, scrutinize, and then make your conclusion out of it, what you make of it. Yeah? Okay. So that's what I'm offering. Informed choices, which we're requesting you to make, based on information that you hear, verify it. Okay. Even Quran tells us, فَتَبَيَّنُوا فَتَثَبَّتُوا. When someone comes, a fasiq individual or someone who's not a good person, verify the information. It's a principle in Islam that you have to verify what has been told. If that wasn't the case, you can just believe in anything, what anyone say, and then you'll regret later. Like somebody says, you know what, your mom is in hospital, is dying or something like that, and you just run towards it, and there was an April Fool thing. You don't like that. Or someone make a joke the opposite, and then someone dies, and yeah. So Islam tells us otherwise. It gives us reasonable approaches to take in our life, how we should behave and so on. So to believe in Islam, believe in God, believe in Prophet Muhammad, believe in the Quran. Quran offers positive proofs and falsification tests. So I just give you some examples of it for you to think and reflect, and then we can discuss perhaps further another time.
Well,
You take care.
Not quite converted.
I'm not asking you to convert. I'm asking you to reflect and make your informed choices based on informed decision.
Yeah. Do you think, is this going to be posted?
Looks like so, yes.
Is there any way it wouldn't be posted? I'd rather it wasn't.
Have you asked them? You asked them.
Are you going to post it?
Good?
He said not to upload.
Like what? Like what?
Okay. What did he say?
Not to upload.
He said that the day of judgment, it will not come.
Yeah, it's okay. I just rather not. It's alright.
Blood, we will blood. Yeah, blood.
When they study that place, okay, they found they are both.
He said blood his face.
Green
The man.
one time. They found the
man.
remain of crocodile, remain of almost all this animals.
It's up to you.
And that
He
place,
said,
that place was green.
I just convey the message.
And it will become green, fully green like the crocodile.
No, later I talked to him. If you blood his face, he said, okay.
Between Arab, they will start to compete with each other.
Open the front, tell me why. Why you do that? Is there any Muslim?
Packing, back.
I show me. Wow. They are fasting. What is the reason? What is the reason? Do you know what the reason? Why you're fasting?
Why do you care?
Mansur, where is the Quran? Where can we find the Quran? Where can we find the Quran? Lies.
He says something, it happens.
Lies are killing. Mansur. Where is the Quran? It doesn't exist. Islam live on lies. Lies and lies. He's buried. You know the Quran.
So he was in 15
Where
years.
can the
Do you have anyone alive who was in 15
Where
years?
can
Hello.
That the body will not be retained.
Did you
He
see
was rotting 3 days. He was rotting 3 days, and then they buried him. He said, "A prophet. I'm a prophet. My body should not be decayed." And then they kept him for 3 days. His body was.
Hey man, Blackie.
He knows he is right. That there is no Quran.